Hello and welcome back to our Boreal Toad training for this year. My name is Kaylee Mullen and I'm going to take a few minutes now to talk to you about the star of the show, Boreal Toads. So Boreal Toads, their scientific name is Anaxyrus boreas. Anaxyrus is saved for true toads of North America, which is fitting because they are found just on the west coast of North America. And boreas is actually an ancient Slavic term for of the mountains. Also very fitting because these toads are a high elevation species. Here in Utah, you're likely to find them at 6,000 foot and above. And they are a highly terrestrial species. They actually have a tougher skin than a lot of the frogs, so they can move further from water. And this comes into play later on, so keep that in mind. A few fun facts to kick off our talk today. So toads mainly eat insects and worms. They love to travel, like I mentioned, and they will make use of all of their landscapes. They'll come together in the spring to breed. They'll use kind of upland meadows foraging around in summer. And then in the winter, they're going to find little hibernation tunnels to kind of wait winter out. And this is why we only survey when we do, because we want to find them in these breeding ponds. Otherwise, these very, very small animals on very large landscapes become very hard to find. So they do hibernate up to 6 months of the year. And when handled incorrectly, they will release a toxin that smells like peanut butter. Strange way to deter someone. So let's talk about how we're going to find toads. I think we'll talk later on about where we're going to find them, but what are we looking for when we're out there? So amphibians, they come in many different life stages. So let's talk about eggs and tadpoles. So eggs are laid in these long strings. Here's another fun fact for you. When people ask the difference between toads and frogs, one of them is frogs usually lay their eggs in small clusters, either on vegetation or floating on the surface, whereas toads will often lay their eggs in long tangled strings, kind of weaving between vegetation. The tadpoles of the boreal toad are jet black, and their eyes are inset on top of their head. So when looking at them from above, they have a very smooth teardrop shape, as you can see here. And then the tadpoles, after a few weeks, they'll metamorphose into toadlets. Toadlets are tiny. They are about the same size as a thumbnail. You can see here one still has their tail. They're darker than the adults, and usually when you find one, you're going to find dozens, and it's a really exciting day. But yeah, you can see here, they look pretty similar to the adults, but they won't have the stripe when they're really young. Okay, so this is what you're going to find throughout the entire survey season, whereas the eggs and tadpoles and toadlets are usually limited to just a section of that survey season. Okay, so the adults. Boreal toads are considered a medium-sized toad, so probably a good handful. They average between like 50 grams and 80 grams, but you can get some really big females at over 100 grams. They're this kind of green to brown coloring, and they have brown warts across their back. You can see that here. And then they have a creamy underside of these inky spots spread uniformly but chaotically across. And the most defining characteristic about boreal toads is this creamy dorsal stripe that runs along their spine. There's only one other toad that looks like this in Utah, and that's the Woodhouse's toad, but they're actually a low elevation species. So if you're below 6,000 foot and you see a toad that looks like this, it's probably a Woodhouse's toad. But if you're in those high elevation wetlands, boreal toad. They have a pretty unique call. So they're hard to survey for because they don't have a breeding call, but they do have a release call. And we should be able to hear that now. And again. So kind of like a peeping chick, some people have said. Okay, so we've talked about the boreal toad, so keep all of those things in mind. Medium-sized toad, kind of a dark green to brown, creamy dorsal stripe, high elevation, no cooling. There are two other amphibians that you're going to see at these high elevation sites. One of those is the boreal chorus frog. You can see them here. They're a very small frog, and they have these three kind of patchy stripes along their back, and they have a very defining characteristic. No matter what color they are, they're going to have this dark eye stripe that kind of runs across their eye and down the side of their body. And they do have a breeding call, and it sounds a lot like when you run your nail down a comb, kind of a. So if you hear that, you're probably hearing a boreal chorus frog. The other amphibian you might see in these higher elevation wetlands is the tiger salamander. So this is Utah's only salamander species, and they kind of live life in two forms. They can stay in an aquatic stage, as you can see here, and they have these beautiful gills. They look quite similar to kind of axolotls, quite a common pet amphibian. Or they can turn into their terrestrial form, and they look like this, like very friendly. But if you'll remember from our previous chapter, anurans, frogs and toads, it means without tail. Tiger salamanders, no matter if it's the aquatic or the terrestrial form, they will have a tail. So if you're seeing an amphibian with a tail, that is going to be a tiger salamander. I saved the most difficult part to last, but we're almost through it, so bear with us. Here are the different larval forms that you might see at these wetlands above 6,000 foot. Boreal toad, boreal chorus frog, tiger salamander. Again, tiger salamander, they do have kind of a defined body and tail, and they're going to have these external gills. So they do look quite different. Chorus frogs and boreal toads, they do look similar, but there are ways to tell them apart. Again, boreal toads, jet black, solid black. They have this nice smooth outline when viewed from above because their eyes are on top of their head. Chorus frogs, however, they're going to have this mottled appearance, and the easiest way to tell them apart is their eyes are on the side of their head. So when viewed from above, you can kind of see where the eyes are and then around. Difficult, but when you've seen both of them, it becomes easier. So they are the three larval forms of amphibians you'll see at high elevations. So let's say it again for boreal toad one more time. Medium-sized toad, greeny brown, cream dorsal stripe, high elevations, no breeding call.